Hello, hello, hello. It looks like we're live. Let's hope that we are.
We're hoping we're live. This is kind of a testing broadcast, a little bit of testing, a little bit of good information. Hopefully we'll get it going.
Yeah, and I'm curious too why the elapsed time is going backwards. Negative 51 minutes. Maybe they're giving us 50 minutes to get out info.
I don't know. Are you sure that can you guys hear us?
I see Ice Pike. I see Vicodin. I see Dreadnought. And it shows 0 watching. Let me just type something in here.
So what I'm seeing, I've just put testing in there. It shows there's 2 on. See? Oh, that one went for 22 seconds. And that one's
Yeah, because it wouldn't go.
Yeah, can you guys hear us?
Chat is closed. Time to find another stream.
What?
That's weird.
Okay, so Beastmaster says all good. And Ozaduzman, hey, how you doing? Ozaduzman says hear us loud and clear. Very nice. So we're just having some trouble on our end now.
Can you see? Okay, you can see chat there.
Yeah, but nothing's moving here. So are they in the? Are they in the?
But they can see each other chatting.
But this up here is not moving, is it?
I didn't really.
You didn't do
it.
anything. Okay.
No.
Thanks for your guys' patience. We so appreciate it. We appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, it's curious how all these settings and everything got changed.
Oh, hi, Pixie Pat. Thank you so much. Thank you, Maria. Thank you for your confirmations. Yeah, this is a little bit of a test. We haven't used this service before, so hopefully all will go well.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for still being part of the family and supporting us while we have been on the road.
Definitely. Huge thank you.
So I want to just talk briefly about what we're seeing here in this photo. So, it's interesting. We see the Pope hat, and we've talked about that before. And then we also see Nefertiti over on the left. And then we see some of the Parakas Skulls. And this is actually one of my favorite topics because I think it's getting to the root of a lot of things, a lot of mysteries. We also saw that the god Dagon, which was a sea god, fish god, it was represented as a human wearing a fish with exactly what the Pope has on its head basically. And then we also see Owans, which was another god, entity that came from the sea and taught mankind a lot of different things. I think there's a lot of convolution going on in stories. There's a lot of these stories that have been mixed over time, intentionally retold in different ways. The Parakas skulls that you see in the middle, they come from Paracas, which is in Peru. And it's fascinating that they're found there because when we look at the Sumerian tales, it talks about these different wars amongst the Anunnaki gods themselves. And of course, these are really just beings. These are not really gods. We should rephrase things. We should get used to rephrasing things because I think it causes a lot of issues with people, especially if you're brought up in an Abrahamic tradition and you're thinking there is only one God, which, if you go into Hinduism and other religions as well, they agree. Ultimately, everything is one. We're all part of one bigger reality, one bigger whole. However, what's been portrayed as God or gods, plural, are beings. And, in many ways, it's kind of like white man going over, the conquistadors went over and took advantage of the natives, the indigenous people they found there, because they thought they were the return of the gods. And they took advantage of that situation, and they looted, they raped, they pillaged, they plundered, they did all sorts of horrible, selfish things, and bringing the gold back to Spain. Always about the gold as well.
Yeah, it's like that saying, he who has the gold makes the rules, which is, still unfortunately pretty true at this point in our lives. But, we're working on ways to change that and to make things more of a barter trade system. Yeah, I mean, we really need to get off of the path where we call these beings gods, because they're nothing more than beings who are a lot more advanced. They know a lot more. There's the mysteries to them aren't so mysterious, and that's important. It's really important to know that these beings are not more than, they simply know more than you do. And they keep us in the dark, and they keep us in the dark because it's important to control us. And as long as they have control, they'll just keep ruling. And, it's time for us to take the control back, take responsibility back for our own lives, our own bodies, learn about ourselves, figure out who we are, remember where we're from, and go from there.
So what I was saying that's interesting is that, in these war amongst themselves, these different factions as well, there is a group that leaves Mesopotamia and ends up going west and is believed to have settled in this exact area. Of course, we're talking about, the Anunnaki, but also about the Igigi. And when we look at the stories, it's very, very interesting because there are always these battles going on. So this is Karen Hudes, and she's a quote-unquote whistleblower who believes the World Bank is controlled by a different species than Homo sapiens. And I have talked about her. It's been a couple of years since we did last video going into Homo capensis and, the fact that there is a distinct species. And by the way, they did do DNA testing on those skulls. And so what the Smithsonian and others want to try to portray is that most of these people with the elongated skulls, they were doing it because they thought it was beautiful. So they would slap boards on the heads of kids and the skulls would deform as the kids grew up. But they thought it was a sign of beauty or aristocracy, nobility. Why would they do that unless they were copying those that were in power, those that actually had skulls along those lines? And there have been other beings in history that, did have skulls like that. So is it just a deformity? Is it just some sort of genetic deformity, some sort of mutation? Or is this actually a different species? That's really the big question. So Karen Hudes, whose bio says she worked for the World Bank as an attorney between 1986 and 2007, during which time she says she revealed conspiracies such as the one that she says involved a crony of then president of the Philippines illegally taking control of a bank in that country. We know the banking system is one of the main ways we've been controlled. And, I was going to save this for the end, but, it's right out there. Who controls the issuance of money controls the government. It's all about who controls the money, and that's Nathan Meyer Rothschild. So who are these beings? And so here, and this is out of Anunnaki.org, the Igigi. Who are the Igigi? Now, is the Igigi, because the Igigi were like lesser. They were thought to be lesser gods below the Anunnaki, below the Enlilites and the Enkyites and Mardikites. And so they were originally the ones that were the slave race until they rebelled. And then humanity was created to basically do the work instead of them doing the work. And then when kingship was passed on from above, as we could read in the Bible itself, and again, a lot of people want to believe all the answers are in the Bible, but again, who wrote the Bible? And, he who controls the world and controls the history is going to write the history. And there's a lot of big question marks in the Bible where there's little bits of something and then it stops. And so, just Genesis 6, for instance, and it talks about the mighty men of old that were like hybrids. And so people think that, that we're talking about fallen angels, but the original translation of angel in the Greek is messenger. And it's interesting, you can look at Jacob's ladder and see them, climbing and coming down and climbing. What were they seeing, really? Were they seeing Merkabas? Were they seeing actual ships? So that's where it gets all convoluted, because some of these beings are very 3D. If we're talking Homo capensis, that's a 3D being. It's just like us. And there are other entities that are mostly on 4 or 5D. operating from above, controlling the ruling elite. So that's where it does get convoluted, and it gets hard to figure out who is who in all this. But when we look at, say, the Greek mythology, and we start talking about, the war of the Titans against the elder gods, it's all fascinating. So is that reflecting the struggle between the Igigi and the Anunnaki, with the Igigi being basically the elder gods and taking control of the situation, and the Anunnaki being more like the Titans? Or are we talking totally separate things? And then, of course, we had the whole line of thinking of astrotheology. It's all just, they're all just forces of nature that we're humanizing in order to understand them. It's we could go and delve into this on so many different levels. And the answer in many cases is not either or, it's all of the above.
Yeah, to me, the most important thing to know and to understand is that we're not being controlled by other humans. We're just not. I think once you grasp that, and once you know that and completely understand that, and embrace it, you're in a much, much better position, because then you can start to look around and start making sense of things. And it takes the wonder out of stuff. When you sit there and wonder, why are things going so terrible? Why is the system not working? Well, it's because it's not our system. It's somebody else's system, and it's set up to control you.
Yeah, very good point, because it's not set up to work for us. It's set up to work for them. So when God's manlike bore the labor, carried the load, the gods' load was great, the toil grievous, the trouble excessive. The great Anunnaki, the seven, were making the Igigi, or Ijigu, undertake the toil. So conquered races, again, this is what we have seen. And why would there be Nordic beings, which when we look at the Pleiadians, they're thought to be benevolent beings? Why would there be some Nordic beings, humanoid, that are operating for the bad guys? Well, again, conquered races, conquered beings, and being forced to, as the Igigi were being forced to do the labor of the Anunnaki. And as we've shared with you guys, when Cindy has remote viewed who like Enlil and Enki are, what do they look like? Let her describe them.
Well, they're somewhere between like humanoid and reptilian, but their skin has like the sheen color. They would be, I don't know if you guys know that pretty color, baby's breath, but as they turn their heads, you can see that color. So they're very interesting looking.
I think there's a lot of references to vampires, that are corresponding to them. If you guys saw the Twilight series, when Edward steps out into the sunlight, just for instance, and use an analogy, he doesn't go poofed. He actually kind of shimmers, and it gives him away that he's something not exactly human anymore. So, think along those lines. So the Atrahasis, which is the Akkadian creation myth, and is so much older, and again, we have so many of these Sumerian cuneiform writings, hundreds of thousands, and they vastly predate the biblical. When we look at the biblical books, really, if we're talking, what is the oldest complete books that we have of, say, something in the New Testament, it's coming from the 3rd or 4th century, AD. So it's coming after the Constantine age. And Constantine, basically used Christianity to, well, if you can't beat them, might as well join them, but you might as well make it into a useful form that will enable the priestly caste and the elites to still maintain control, enable Homo capensis to still maintain control, or the Igigi, for when the Anunnaki left and are doing their thing on other planets and other places as well, they left the Igigi in control apparently here, and that's kingship being passed down through certain bloodlines. And so we see, again, it's about slavery, it's about forced work. Think about what we have in the system today. Do you pay taxes? Who are you paying taxes to, really? Where do they go? Ultimately, they go to the World Bank when you look at it, and they get loaned back out to others at an interest rate. So, yeah, the Boston Tea Party happened for far less taxation than what we have now. It's not even close. So really what we have is a serfdom, and we still have lords and ladies. We still have a ruling elite class, and we need to recognize that. So it's fascinating to see all these ones that they really can be analogous, and they can go along and make a lot of sense about what's happening on the planet. Because ultimately, if the planet is just nothing but a resource to these beings, because they don't originally come from here, this is not their home, they don't have ties to it, they're just basically using it as a resource. Well, then the way the corporations of the world treat the planet seems to make a lot more sense, because they're just viewing it as a resource. And when it's depleted, then they'll just move on. This is just one of many that they have.
Yeah, it is. It's what they do, and they're really good at it. And until we wake up enough people, so enough people understand what the true ruling people or beings are, we're going to be a little bit stuck. But I do believe that people are spaced out just so that when this system does collapse, because I do feel like something is collapsing, something is going to change. People are going to need to know answers, and they're going to get the answers from people like me and like you guys who've done all the research, who've finally figured out that, hey, something doesn't feel right, and usually when something doesn't make sense, it's usually not true. And we've spent the time to do that research.
So, so we recognize that, perhaps this isn't really humans doing this to humans too much. It's something else. As we see here, new DNA results released from the Parakas Elongated Skulls. And so, even the Smithsonian, when we look at it, and I'll have a link on that, grudgingly acknowledges that they're a little different now. Because they wanted to bury this, and they have buried this. Most of these skulls, when there was hair found, there was red-headed hair. And we know the stories of the red-headed giants, that those were the ones that were kind of cannibalistic. Not nice. And so again, when we go back to Genesis, we read of, the sons of God, and it's interesting because they change it. They change all the translations. But when we go back to the oldest, they're talking, the sons of the gods. Again, Elohim is plural. And when we look at the true Elohim, not to confuse the situation, but if we really want to talk about the true Elohim, those are more like the planets and the stars themselves, which are beings. The planets and the stars themselves are beings. At the core level, we look like a star, albeit most humans look more like an orb when they're out of their body. That's what we are anyway, because we are energy, we are consciousness, and consciousness goes on. We're just inhabiting vehicles. So, your body is a vehicle for you to operate in this 3D reality. When the body is not functioning anymore, you still exist. And you're not gonna, unless you firmly believe you are going to a hell to be tormented, well, then you can go to a hell to be tormented. It'll be in the lower astral realm. And it'll be a creation of your own beliefs. So we have to realize, what's going on, because we've been so manipulated as basically, a server species for these other species. So what did they find? Well, they found the DNA is different. It's different. And yeah, some of the skulls are people mimicking it, but there's tons of them that are not. And it's interesting too, because we also find skulls like these in the Caucasus region as well. And what's also interesting is most of the native people of the Americas were type O blood type. And not the case. These are mostly A's, B's, and a very high percentage of AB, especially like AB negative, which is the most uncommon blood type. So very, very curious. And, it speaks of the fact that there have been many different types of humanoid species here. We have the little Homo florensis, which is literally hobbit size, literally, 3-ish feet tall. A tiny humanoid 3 feet tall, not dwarfism, it's a totally separate species. And there's many other giant species that they've done the best they can to just wipe out any trace of, because this would really uncover a lot more of the bigger picture. So they've tried to get rid of them, they tried to dump them in the ocean, do whatever they can to hide that history because they're writing our history. So if you look at, the world's beliefs politically, if we look at the world's system, if we look at the world's religions, and we're taking, the majority role, as we know, the Abrahamic traditions, more than 50% of the world follows the Abrahamic traditions. And in fact, they're all over the world. Well, who's writing this version of the story? They always rewrite things. They always rewrite. The victors, the ones in control, rewrite the history. So we have to utilize our minds and our hearts and sense the truth, but also look at traditions from all over the world and start to piece together the puzzle pieces.
And they have this nasty thing where they try to demonize other religions and stuff. And what I never understood when I was trying to go to church, because I tried to go to church. I tried to be a really good, Sunday school person. I did my absolute best. But things just still didn't make sense. I was thinking, okay, so why in this little tiny town are there 3 churches, and all 3 churches are saying that their way is the only way, and then if you step outside of this, you're going to go burn. It was, I just knew that there was something wrong. And I actually felt bad about myself because I was so curious about astrology, so curious about tarot cards, so curious about energy and how it really works. But then I felt bad because I guess in these churches, well, we're just not supposed to get curious, and if you do, well, bad things can happen to you. But then there's all these other things that say, well, you're going to be God's like I am, what Jesus says, you will do things greater than I. And I just couldn't make any sense of it. And it wasn't until I took that leap of faith where I knew that this isn't true, because there's just too many things going wrong here. Too many things don't make sense. And I stepped outside the box and started looking at other traditions. That's when things started to fall together.
So, here's another link that we will have connected for you guys. And there's an interview in there with Alfred Lebremont Weber, and talking about, with Dr. Edward Spencer, by the way, who has talked a lot about Homo capensis and the plan to population reduction. Don't we see that? Control the population. Because look again back to the Sumerian legends and stuff. Too many humans, too noisy, too uncontrollable. Look. They are united. They are one. They are going to be like us. We can't have that. So, again, they bit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So, what is original sin? Well, it's going against the Ijiji Anunnaki, because if we don't obey, because we are created to be their servitors. But in reality, that's just the body. So, ultimately, we are as much source as any of them. And sources within us. So the powers and the abilities are within us to transcend, anything they can transcend. They just have more technology than we have and a clearer understanding of the way the universe works. But that's why we go within, because within will bring the answers. So, this is happening all over again. We could look at it as another Tower of Babel / flood. Situation that's going on by the controllers. And so I'll have all the links for you guys so you could listen to the talks if you haven't. And again, there's so many things. It's a power structure is what we have. It's a power structure that goes on down. So many people are aware of the rumors of not just the Vatican, but the Jesuit section of the Vatican, and the second blue word there that begins with an ILL, ends in an I, which will lead us to the Draco Reptilians and the Orion Greys as well. So obviously, if we saw a reptilian, a Draco, walking down the street, people would, mess themselves for the most part. I mean, they are terrifying beings. If we saw a gray, it would still freak us out. If we saw something like Homo capensis, we might think, well, he's got a little bit of an odd head there, but he looks really kind of human. Well, there you go. We use them to control us. and stay in the background, because this is just one planet to them. This is just one mining operation, one operation for resources. And this is getting into the whole monetary system, and this is from Miss Hudes, and she gets into the control structure as well. And a lot of people aren't going to like it, but she's pointing out that President Trump is another one of them, and he's also under the control, and this is all part of their plan. So they have many people believing that he's a white hat, but in reality, is the division that's coming up because of having a Obama presidency, which so alienated the right and was extremely painful to the right. And now the Trump presidency, is just as painful to the left. And again, it's that left-right Machiavellian. Read Machiavelli's The Prince. That's how they control us. Why not get them to be? It's right there in the Bible. You can't have them united. Let's separate them. Let's split up and divide their tongues, set them up into tribes. And if we look at the Anunnaki stories, the Sumerian stories, each one had a different god ruling them, a different divine being ruling them, because, again, they're not gods. They're just beings. But that's what the situation. So if we read Deuteronomy 32, and, that is basically the Song of Moses, which many people equate Moses with Akhenaten as well. And it talks all about how, God set up the different nations, gave to each nation its inheritance, and, divided it amongst the sons, they translate, of Israel. Israel didn't even exist when Moses was here. That shows you just how changed everything is. Israel comes later down the line, but so how would he split it up amongst the sons of Israel? When the older translations, say the sons of the gods, which goes in perfect agreement with what we read in the Sumerian writings, which are 1,200 to 2,000 years older. So it all kind of goes together there when we start to see that. And, this is a tweet from Karen on her Twitter, "Humanity to Homo capensis, we are united." I wish that was the case, because we're not. Obviously, if we're battling ourselves in the streets, just flowing into that left-right dichotomy, then we're not united, and that's what they want. They don't want us united. And this is from the Smithsonian Magazine. And I wanted to really, it gets into the discovery of Homo capensis briefly. But it says, today, fossils once classified as Homo capensis are now considered members of Homo sapiens. So they acknowledge that they were different in that statement, that there is something, but they say, well, no, it's just another branch of Homo sapiens, even though it's actually an older hominid species.
Yeah, so there's tons and tons of evidence to go through and sift through. If you're still not sure, we'll leave all the links here for you guys. You can go look through it yourself. I think that's the most important thing to do, is walk this journey yourself. That's the most important thing that you can do for yourself right now, to try to make sense of this world, and actually for other people, because we know eventually the internet and everything is going to crash, and it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and we're going to be carrying this information to help other people. So it is important to read up on this stuff and understand that things just are not as they seem, and other people are going to want answers at some point, and you're going to have them.
Love Always When says, is it true that reptiles don't have a, my eyes are a little blurry, Ligan soul or something? Is it a light soul? But every living creature has a source in it. Yeah. Now, we had talked about a little bit the story of the golem, and the fact that we can, in our consciousness, because we have source within us, we could actually create beings. You could create energy beings using the life force. And they know how to do this, and they do this all the time. So there are beings out there that are created, they're thought forms that can actually affect things on a physical level often as well. And some of your hauntings are these things, as well. Now, if we look into the Taoist philosophy, you have basically, you're a composite being. A human is a composite being, which has a yuan shen. So you have like a soul, a spirit. There's an essence to you that never dies. But when it comes down into this reality, you get 3, what you could view as guardian angels, 3 Hun spirits, that's what they're called in Chinese, and they actually reside in our liver. So if we do drink too much, then we open ourselves up to driving the Hun out, in which case it can leave us susceptible to carnal desires and becoming more carnal orientated. And then we have 7 Po spirits, and the Po spirits are earthly spirits. And when the physical body dies, the Po energy goes back to the earth and just dissipates back into the earth, because that's where it came from. The Hun, you could think of them as spirit guides. They will either, one of them might incarnate, and you might be on the other side helping it from the other side, or they go on and they help other people. They are basically, again, more eternal beings. And then your yuan shen, your soul, basically decides, after it's processed its lessons in this life, what to do next. What didn't I succeed at? What do I want to learn next? And then incarnate again. Now the Po spirits, sometimes they won't go back into the earth. They'll fight that. And that's when you get what we would call a shade, a shadow, or what we would think of as a lot of traditional hauntings. And if they learn, which many times they will learn, that they could take life force from the living beings, both human and animal, and kind of extend their own life and stay with us on this plane, really in the astral when we get down to it, but kind of in that middle ground, then they could prolong, their existence as that being, instead of going back to the earth and then being, again, kind of reborn. So it's all interesting when we look at these different traditions, but there are definitely a lot of different beings that have been walking on this planet, and then other ones that maybe not necessarily walking with physical feet, but still controlling the situation here.
Yeah, and I really honestly feel that these beings, the controllers, they know this information, they understand this information, so they know how to manipulate it and have it work for them. And that's another reason why we've been limited to one book called the Bible, and they say, okay, don't go outside of this realm, but there's so many other books with these Chinese teachings and, the Hindu teachings, and just so much to enrich our lives so we can understand what's going on around us, and make sense of it, and have your life be like peaceful and hopeful and all of these things. So they do their best to make sure that we go against our natural grain, and that kind of trips us up, puts us in trauma. And when people are in trauma, they're generally fearful. And if you're fearful, you're looking for answers, and they come forward and they provide these answers. So we tend to follow them because it's not the first time they've done this. They continue to do this.
Yeah. So if you've listened to like Corey Goode and David Wilcox, for instance, they talk about pre-Adamites, which, they found a lot of those bodies down in Antarctica. And again, many people will believe that they're just disinfo. Other people believe that every word they say is perfectly true. Often we get 90% truth, 10%, falsehood, to kind of placate ourselves a little bit, give us a little of the story, but give it with a twist so that they can still kind of maintain control, or pre-program those people that are wakening up to the fact that we're not alone here in a way that will benefit them. So if, say, for instance, I'm just going to say that, perhaps, we have Corey Goode and all, he was ex-military. Well, maybe he is still part of the military. And if he's still in that MIC, control, or at least, partially control, because again, there is a soft disclosure going on that's speeding up. And again, when you talk about things like this, your life gets in danger. It's just obvious. So maybe he's doing just enough, where he is giving us info and helping to wake us up, but not allowed to go into certain areas because he'll just disappear, or there'll be a mishap. So we have to recognize that too. But I think there's a lot of truth out there, and I think that we are waking up to the fact that we are not alone. And so then this also talks about the inner earth group too, because there are these beings, like if we think of Adama over at Mount Shasta, now that's a 5D being and very real, but they are 5D. And then there are other entities in the inner earth, such as the Nagas of legend and others. There's native legends from all over the world that even talk about what we would consider the reptilians that you have to be very, very careful of. So it's interesting because, again, this one's title is that Karen Hudas exposes Homo capensis rule the world. We could just see it. And as we were saying, look to Akhenaten, look at the skulls. And if you say, well, that's just their headdress. It's a beauty thing, an ornament. Well, what about the kids? They got elongated skulls too. They look a little different too, don't they? And by the way, if we're cutting in and out, it's because we are extremely remote and still kind of camping. So we just are attempting to do a live because we love to bring the family together. And I think it's amazing that we have any connection where we are.
Yeah, so I don't know how long we're going to have the connection. We're just grateful for what we do have. But yeah, I mean, these pictures are all over the place, and they've come up with certain excuses as far as, why do these people have such big heads, and what are they saying, and what does it mean? And, one of the things that woke me up was when I was learning about the pyramids, and they made them out to be like tombs for the pharaohs. But there was never anything like that found in them. And they have all of this information. But what do they teach us in school is that they were made by chisel and hammer by people who were, who were only smart enough to use a chisel and hammer. How could that be? All this information starts to gather up, and people really start to answer questions. And it's like we're at this pinnacle in our lives where we have access to all of this information. And sometimes I think that's why they want things to crash. It's because we are learning, we are coming together with our information, we are having a new understanding, and that can only go on so long before things start to break down.
Most definitely. And so, what am I personally afraid of in the sense that it scares me? Well, this merger with AI and robotics, because I see that, some were talking about Elon Musk. I don't fear death because I've had experiences that assure me that, we are transcendent. We are simply in the body. When I was 5 years old, I shared with you guys many times, I had an out-of-body experience, and I knew, I am in the body most of the time, but I am not the body. And I just had that realization. And I think it's because of past life work that enabled me to see that clearly. Now, however, when you have people like Elon Musk and others that want to merge humanity with robotics and keep this body alive, then, that does get scary, because what about trapping a soul trap? It's a natural part of life is death and moving back and then reassessing. We go back and forth between the astral and this plane of existence until we are at a point where we can transcend it. And for many, the light bodies are being activated, Merkabas are coming online, and we're going to be able to transcend that 3D, 4D loop and go up into the higher realms. And that then gives us a whole different perspective on our being. And then, of course, we've touched on as well Buddha's realization. And so the traditions speak of the fact that, I was talking to, I forget who we were talking to, a friend, and we were talking about the Devas. One of our clients the other day, how there's these Devic beings, which we can think of as being more closely related to the high angelic realm. Because the angelic realm extends all the way down to the earth elementals that are taking care of a single plant, a single flower. So this is also part of how they have distorted things. They've gotten us to be even afraid of beings that are simply taking care of the life of the individual plants and things like that on the earth, thinking that it's all demonic, it's all scary. No, they just want to close your consciousness shut so that they could control your consciousness, manipulate you. And if you believe that what they say is true in life and in death, then they could really control you. And that's why we see people doing crazy things like, blowing themselves up amongst other people with bombs strapped onto themselves, thinking that they're going to heaven. That's not what Source is all about. Source is all about exploration, but about love as well, and about compassion, because Source is within all of us. So that's what Namaste means. It means the Source in me recognizes Source in you. And, sometimes people will get an issue with saying Source as opposed to God, but that's just conditioning. Again, that's just conditioning. And when we look at our education system, so much of it is total conditioning, because there have been so many things that we've been told are truths scientifically that have been found to be completely false now. Completely false. Absolute falsehoods. Totally wrong. And, such as, the model of the universe and how the universe works, for instance, as now we're learning more about electric universe theory. And, once we understand some of how things work, we become dangerous. Look, they're just like us again. Homo sapiens are becoming too much like Homo capensis. They're becoming too much like the Enkiites. We can't have this because, we have to be able to control them. Otherwise, we got to do our own work ourselves.
It's true. I think one of the most important things that they do to control us is they design our belief system for us. And our belief systems are so powerful. They drive us. Our belief systems, if we think about it, going back into childhood, to help wake people up, they have to be broken down. And I've actually talked to people who have such a strong belief system, and I put stuff in front of them and say, see, things aren't always as you see them. And they said, if I believe that, then I have to rewrite my whole life. They just spent too much time in school learning what they learned, and I threw a wrench in there, and they just can't handle it, so they choose not to even look.
So some actually believe that Moses was Akhenaten, and when we look at what Akhenaten did at that time, they were supposedly worshiping many different gods, and he made it just one god. And as we know, according to the stories, the people of Moses were in Egypt. Now the thought is as a slave race, but is that really the case? Is that just another analogy? And then they go and they start their venture, and Moses eventually gives way to Joshua as Moses passes on, and Joshua conquers Canaan. And of course, then you have people saying, well, they justify the slaughter of everybody that was living in Canaan because they were supposedly of the Nephilim. So there's been such a distortion. And recognize again, who controls the world? Well, the Bible will tell you it's Satan, the adversary. Then why would we believe the official story without, doing our own due diligence and research and comparing all the stories that we get from all over? And it's so fascinating that him and Nefertiti have those elongated heads, as does their kids. And again, the way that it can control us is not just through our religion, also through the money system. And, Rothschild himself, Nathan Meyer Rothschild, saying, who controls the issuance of the money controls the government. We really are run by corporations. The countries are almost illusions. When we look at the wars, who benefits? Well, they do, because for one, it always leads to more and more consolidation of the wealth. It causes a lot of pain and suffering, which there's certain negative entities on different levels that feed off of that, like a big buffet, and that's just a fact. And, is Homo capensis, still ruling the world as we look at some of the Rothschild family? Well, you could judge for yourself.
You just got to take a look at that. And actually, you can feel their energy. To me, it's pretty nasty. Makes me want to cringe. But yeah, they sure have a hold of us and our belief systems, and they mold us from childhood. So it's just really nice to see so many people in chat that are awake, that understand, that are doing their due diligence to find out the truth. That's really important. And there's other things that they want to do to us to try to control us further too, with the AI and mixing AI with nanotechnology. And it just gets to be a more scary and scarier situation out there.
So we had a request for tuning forks, sweetie.
Oh.
Okay, so Cindy's going to go and grab the tuning fork so we could tune you guys. And getting back into this, yes, that's the next thing, because we are mutating. Our DNA is changing. We are becoming more fully developed, multidimensional beings. It's a fact. There have been kids that have been born with 3 strands DNA, and really there are probably many people now that multiple strands of DNA are coming online. The other thing to understand too is DNA is not just in the physical body, it's in the etheric, it's in the other dimensions as well. So it's fascinating to think about that along those lines. Every time we take an incarnation, we're kind of like adding also to ourselves another piece to the puzzle, another aspect. And so, it's just fascinating to study all this. But what they want to do is they want to change what's happening naturally as the energies are coming in from the cosmos, coming in from source. This galactic superwave that we've talked about that is coming is going to change everything. And, when that does arrive, which we think it's still a ways off from what we've gotten, the big superwave, the big event might still be a good 10, 15 years off. So we have to gird ourselves for the long haul and to basically, recognize this is a struggle for the very essence of humanity and really for our own souls when you get down to it.
Mm-hmm. So I think is it going to be time to tune? Do you want to tune now? Okay, so we're going to tune now, and what I need you guys to do is think of something, a time in your life where you're really, really happy, or think of something that you're striving for, a goal, but have a really good picture in your mind of what you want to be or what you want to happen.
So that second one was DNA repair. So again, everything is energy, so sound has the ability to change energy patterns. And a lot of you guys are discovering different hertz as far as different frequencies that you could listen to on YouTube, for instance, like 741 and others, that can help us, in so many different ways, get rid of negative energy patterns and help to reestablish ourselves in a more harmonious place.
It's true. Like, our bodies are made up of this sound barrier. And a lot of times when we have an emotional trauma or something happens outside of us, there's like this standing energy wave in our energy field, and it causes problems, and ultimately it works its way into the 3D body. So, and they know this too. These are things that these elites know. So they do create a lot of trauma around us. It makes it more difficult for us to connect to our higher selves. It makes it very difficult for us to be congruent with our surroundings, because we're walking around with these energy bodies that are irky-jerky, and they're just kind of bouncing off other irky-jerky energy bodies and creating traumas, more traumas. So it is good to have the tunings done. I think it does help. It does seem to make a big difference in a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, and that'll be the next big thing. We don't need to look towards putting other foreign energies and objects into ourselves. Really, it's all about clearing energy patterns. That's really what it is, because ultimately, everything is energy. And as we know from Einstein and Tesla's work and Max Planck, and we're creating our reality as we go. Everything is energy. Energy can't be created or destroyed. It just simply changes form. So it's up to us to choose what form it's going to take, and choose to not become part of the Borg as well, because that is really what they do have in mind, is to make humanity basically part of the Borg. And we must simply say no, and we must resist, and we must be strong, and we must stand united. And we can't stand united if we're constantly fighting with each other.
Right. Yeah. And, a lot of people are actually going to be excited with the technology, and they can hardly wait to plug in to try these new things. But, I think our organic abilities to grow those and to foster those are far more powerful than anything that AI could walk in and try to take over. It seems like everything, they're trying to create things in the ether that we can already naturally do, like the Wi-Fi signals, from machine to machine. But as people, we can read each other from person to person. It's just that hasn't been brought to our attention, and it hasn't been fostered.
So I want to thank everybody for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. It's been a challenge to get videos up, so we've just been focusing on EEARTS, as it is the monetized channel, and we are still in this system, even though we're struggling to break free and getting closer all the time. I think I'll start putting some of these also up on Evolutionary, because as you know, Evolutionary has almost 67,000 subscribers, and there's still a lot of people that haven't come over to EEARTS yet. So we'll upload them like a day or two later if we're able to, but we'll keep doing as much as we can while we can. Keep preparing. Today I expect to be very productive, so we will get a few more up today. And we want to thank you guys for being part of the family. Develop your spiritual practice, and it's wonderful that we can develop our spiritual practice in a way that is our own. Be unique, because we are each unique expressions of God, of the true source of everything. Every one of us is unique. That's a blessing. We don't have to homogenize. We can be a unique expression and still be part of the greater whole. So I'll leave you guys with that thought.
God bless and namaste.
Namaste, guys.